Hey, it's From the West Barn with Joe West and
Mike Shimshack.
Today we've got Greg Becker on. A great story, Nashville hit songwriter with cuts with Carrie Underwood, Tim McGraw, Alan Jackson, Rascal Flatts. The list goes on and on. Very successful in Nashville as a songwriter, and then has parlayed into a whole new as a chrysalis, or a chrysalis would do, and a butterfly would come out. He is now in the theater world.
I've sunk to new lows.
Well, I just love it when people become, it's like there was that, who had that label on EMI? It was Billy Lehman. Was it Billy Lehman's label? Chrysalis?
Yeah.
Right?
I don't know who. Yeah, I remember Chrysalis.
You remember that, Mikey?
I do.
I think it's Billy Lehman. Or no.
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah.
Oh, man, it's going to come
Am I
out.
muted?
No, you're on. I will spurt it out here in the next 15 minutes. But it was the dude who founded EMI. His son, I think, had this label. And back in the day, I had some bands that he wanted to sign. But I went back and looked it up, and I thought, man, what a great. I always loved the David Geffen Asylum records, and what it sort of stood for. And Chrysalis, sort of the idea that a creator. It's so funny, Greg. You could speak to this. It's so funny when people. They meet you, they want to immediately identify. They're so busy. We've narrowed down our selective skills to say, this is that dude. This is what he does. He is a drummer.
Yeah.
He is a songwriter.
Yeah. He's a track guy. He's a melody guy. He is a country guy. Yeah, absolutely.
So, and you have as all good creators, all true creators, they are attracted to the love of creating, to what the potential, what it could be. You're wrapped up, you don't know what it is, you're in this chrysalis, and then you become this beautiful butterfly, or it becomes a complete fire shit show and you go burning to the ground. Part of that is the beauty of being a creator, and you've done that. Tell us a little bit about that transition from being every day in a songwriting room to saying, hey, I'm going to do something that's a Broadway show.
It kind of, for me, has always been spawned or sparked by boredom, I guess. I'm always looking for something to creatively challenge myself with, whether that's, been songwriting or doing the musical or building a house, having kids, working on a Lego kit, you name it. I'm always looking for that next thing. This past week, it's been putting up a zip line properly to support it. To get
sounds incredibly safe.
The right angle of fall, so I don't break any bones on the kids, but they have enough action and excitement to keep them out of my studio for a good 45 minutes or so.
You don't want free fall. You want something between, what do they say in plumbing? It's a half inch every 2 feet, I think, is what you need for gray water to drink.
Exactly. That's exactly.
But it's like, you got to figure that out, because how old are your kids?
8, 10, and 12. So
yeah, because that's precisely the age which they accelerate heavily, and if they end up putting a zip line at like a 45-degree angle, it's going to end up with you at Williamson County Medical Center.
Yeah, but it's been that the whole career for me. I mean, I don't think I started out intending to be a per se country music writer. I still don't consider myself that. I consider myself mainly a lyric guy or idea guy in the room, and depending on who I'm writing with, I feel like kind of a chameleon, because I've gotten to write with some great voices and some great talents and some great track guys and girls, I should say. And to me, it's always kind of finding what's best in the room and what's best at the moment and chasing that down.
Can you, first of all, I want to go into depth on what you just said, but tell us the name of the musical.
Oh, Wonder Women, the musical. Yeah. Okay.
And this is currently in production in Chicago?
It's, no, it's like, it's kind of swirling around the bowl in the toilet waiting to go down.
It's doing festivals.
That's a terrible analogy. I don't know why I just thought of that. That's horrible. But
you should really do PR for it.
It's all, I should really be the marketing guy. Yeah, I just wrote this turd that just kind of floats and floats. And
you're probably not going to like it at all.
Yeah. It's no, it's kind of on pause. We just, I've been working on this thing for like maybe 4 years now. From the writing to, we've been in a couple festivals. We were in Atlanta, and then we just finished Chicago. And then it was about to go to New York and LA to do readings to prepare for some kind of a potentially, hopefully off Broadway would be the next step, some smaller production somewhere to develop it. And then of course we are where we're at. And so everything's on pause pretty much.
Can you tell us a little bit about, like, did the genesis of this idea solely reside with you? Did you partner with somebody? How did it happen? Tell us a little bit about a higher view of the plot of what this story is.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I was kind of at a point with the songwriting where, again, that creative challenge thing where I think my creative itch just needed to be scratched by something different. And I'd heard this interview on NPR with Terry Gross had done with his historian from Harvard who had written this book about the history of Wonder Woman and who created her. And it turns out it was a really interesting story. She was created by the guy who invented the lie detector, and he was in this polyamorous relationship with 3 women. He had a wife, they had a mistress who they shared, and then they had a dominatrix that lived in the attic. I mean, the story just got crazier and crazier. And so I
totally normal.
Yeah, exactly.
Completely
Very
normal.
Country music idea, first of all, I must say. But couldn't find a co-writer that wanted to work on that. So I told my wife about it, and she got the book, and she reads. I don't read because I'm a child of television and serial, so I don't read. I fall asleep when I read. But she read the book and was like, "Babe, you should write a musical about this." And
Wow.
I haven't written musicals. I just love musicals, but I've never written anything like that. And so I decided maybe start writing some songs that would tell this story. So, there's this part of the story where the guy goes to a sorority party with the mistress, and it's a baby spanking party where they're dressing up like babies. And so I wrote this song called Baby Party, and just kind of having fun, really, with no co-writers in the room. It's amazing what you can sometimes do. No one's there to stop you. And so I wrote all of these songs to sort of tell the story in song, and then started to reach out for any connections I had to the theater world to find somebody to write what I was calling the lines, the dialogue, the script. But it turns out that's called the book, which is the storyline that goes through the whole thing. And I had a hard time finding anybody that wanted to handle it the way I did, which was very funny and irreverent and historical. And so I just started filling in the words between the scenes, the dialogue, and ended up with kind of a rough script that I could send to people and get feedback on. And then slowly it sort of built. I'd get feedback from people in the theater world that say, "Hey, I know a dramaturge." And I'm like, "Well, what's that?" And they're like, "Oh, it's like a script editor." So they'd give me their notes, and then I'd send it to actors, and they'd give me their notes. And little by little, it got better and better. And of course, I'd read books and do master classes online and that kind of stuff, study other scripts. Same way as I learned songwriting, just listen to stuff you like.
Well, what is it about a guy like you that has made the decision that there's no positive affirmation that you should be in the playwright world? No one's ever you haven't been hanging out at a coffee shop where a lot of off-Broadway actors are, or, the universe is not telling you to do this. You don't come from a long line of people that have done this. And yet
they told me not to do songwriting. I moved to Nashville, and they're like, "Oh, dude, you just missed it. Sorry, you don't do tracks. Well, too bad. Nobody's signing anymore." And
well, I think
that's
I'm more
true. It's so true.
I'm more interested in what it is. My father worked in the steel mill for 19 years. And then he worked another 20 years at the post office. And I came from a whole swath of the country that's what happened. People went to work and then they came home. And the idea that a person like you existed out there, which was like, "Hey, you know what I might dip my toe into today?" It's like, I'm going to create a Broadway play.
ridiculous.
So for me as a person, I really am like, wow, why does that guy if you were in a crowd of 1,000 people, I would like want to go up to you and say, what is up with this dude? Why does he do this? What makes him think that he can do it? First of all, like, what is that? Do you have any, I'm requiring you to disassociate with yourself here, but like, what is that?
It's a dangerous cocktail of passion and ignorance, I guess. You know, where I'll get real passionate about something like, oh, this would be hilarious. I should tell this story. Or, oh, this would be a great song. And being ignorant enough to not know how bad the odds are or how expensive it is to do it. How much
work.
How much work. My gosh. You know, we live in an old Victorian that's built in 1906, and we found this place, and it was a disaster when we found it. But I was like, oh man, this will be awesome. It's on a corner lot, and we can build up here and do all this stuff. And I remember my parents at the time coming down being like, oh man, this is like the biggest mistake you've ever made. You realize that. And Mike's been over to the house. It's like, you know,
it's gorgeous.
Turn it into something. Yeah.
It's gorgeous.
So, you have to go past what people are going to, there's always going to be naysayers. There's always going to be people that say, you can't, you shouldn't, you're not able to. And to me, it's
how do you bind that in reality? When you see the first weeks of American Idol, which everybody loves because the people are so horrible, how does the right person get that message and not one that will never be able to compete? Like, how do we sort of rationalize those two, which is like, never give up, and hey, maybe you should consider doing something else?
It's weird. That's a weird show to me. That's a whole weird part of our society to me also. I mean, those people, like, if you're a singer, you can sing. You don't need necessarily an audience. That, to me, that's a different thing, that fame and that money. Same with being a writer. I've always felt like I can write. It doesn't matter to me if I'm in a publishing deal or if something's been cut or what. I just write. I like writing. I like making stuff up. And so to me, it's always been, it's never been about the money per se. I mean, I think at the beginning it was for sure, I got to get into a deal. This would be awesome. As soon as I get a publishing deal, I'll be set. And then it became, well, as soon as I get a cut, I'll be set. That's great. Then it goes up to, as soon as I get a cut by a major label artist, that's great, you know, and eventually you realize that it's never big enough. I mean, I never got, you know, a Grammy or something, say if that was the ultimate goal, but I'm sure, and I know friends who have gotten lots of Grammys, there's something beyond that too. And then there's like, well, now what? And so I try to put the now what in the now and be like, you know, let's write a musical. Why not? You know, and fortunately, I say very fortunately, I got lucky enough with some of my songs that I could get a baseline of income going such that I can do stuff like this. I don't have to really, really sweat it out anymore like I did in my 20s. You know, I worked at Home Depot and I worked at the mall and I worked for spraying fragrance on people at the mall. I would do anything to make money. Fortunately, I did that long enough so that I got this baseline going, so I could get out of that, and then really just pursue what you're interested in. You know, you got to pause every now and then in life and just say, hey, you know, am I challenging myself? Am I doing what I love? Am I serving other people? Am I going to leave anything behind? And every now and then we get off track chasing money and what we call stability. But you know, had I stayed home, like you were saying, you know, my family all works. They all work at this company that they've got going. I had this great job at MIT before I moved to Nashville in this laboratory. And it was a government sponsored funded lab. So I had this very clear path. I could have stayed there my whole life and done really well, but I'd be bored silly, you know, after a certain point. And to me, that wasn't going to be happiness. It was just having a great career, lots of money, living in Boston, you know. So
I was watching this podcast yesterday, and this guy is like this big muscle dude. He like started crying on the podcast. You know, I thought to myself, Joe, we got to get some people to cry on the podcast. Like, it was really compelling to watch. So, Greg,
cry.
Can you tell us how you're funding this thing?
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Talk about ignorance. Okay. This is where the cocktail dangerous.
So are you funding this by yourself?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Well, so this is literally truly an all in.
Yeah. Oh,
that's incredible.
Very, again, ignorance didn't serve me well in this case. But it did. I take that back. It did. I mean, it's been a real rewarding experience. But I also, got help along the way. ASCAP gave me a grant. Tennessee Arts gave me a grant. I've done some fundraisers that have done pretty good. I've had some people just donate money. Dramatist Guild gave me a grant, which I was shocked. I'm like, I'm not a dramatist, but thanks, But there's money out there. People want to help. People get excited about people that are passionate about stuff, I find. So anytime I just not go in and ask for money or just speak from the heart about why I want to tell this story, why I'm doing this, people be like, go, do it. Here, what do you need? So it's been helpful. But yeah.
Has that been natural for you? I think that one of the big struggles I had coming up was that I really wanted to be taken care of as an artist until I realized I needed to also be the business person in my life.
Oh, gosh.
So it's like, for you, it's like, oh, I want to do this play. And then it's like, wait a minute, I got to go compel people to fund me to do this or help do this. So I've got to actually become now a business manager for this play. Talk a little bit about you being a person that's so driven creatively that would lead you to leave the life that you had and to do this, right? And all the speculation, and then having to make sure that you're going to show up on the business side of it. What does that feel like to you? Did that feel natural?
No. That's awful. That's the worst part, I think. It's as hard, for me, it's as hard being the businessman as it is for some songwriters to go out and network. I hear that a lot from songwriters that will not leave their house and they just want to email people and they want things to happen, but you have to network. And so I'm finding with this theater community, you have to market and you have to get funding and you have to raise money to do this stuff. So for me at the beginning, like I was saying, it wasn't really about the money, and I really didn't and still don't know if I would make anything off of this. This could be a big $50,000 dump of something I do to create something. And then, the satisfaction is that I created it. So it's not been natural at all. And the hardest part in this whole process has been, like, I've tried bringing people in as marketing or fundraising helpers, assistants, interns, whatever. And it's never really worked out because they don't have that passion about the project. It only really works when I talk to people and I go out and I play them a song or I tell them the story or I get excited about it. And that's okay. I like telling the story and I like talking about why I'm doing it. So it's just,
I think it's an important note to say, like, hey, it's part of your obligation to care for the children that you procreate. So if you're going to birth this play, it's your responsibility to provide for it. So it puts it in a different light for me. Like, I now have to go out and work and do all this stuff that isn't who I am, but it's who I need to be for my family, which is my songs or my projects, So I think that's something that the people that hopefully are watching this are interested or at some level of being creative. So they have to realize that the reality of the future is nobody is going to do them like they do them. Nobody's going to go out and pitch your songs like you pitch your songs, or produce a record like you. They're not going to represent you. The whole staff of people are not going to do it like you do when you go into a room. I think it's important for people as a walkaway to say, hey, if I do eventually get to that next level, like Greg Becker or Mike Shimshack, that I'm going to have to, there's another responsibility, which is I'm going to have to do that thing, which I don't feel like I'm necessarily wired to do, but I have to do it for my music.
Yeah. I mean, I was fortunate that I did that in the music business for so long that when I got to the theater world, I'm doing that. And I think a lot of other playwrights and guys who write musicals that I met are not doing that. And even at Chicago, I met with a bunch of the other writers and they'd be like, man, you're so driven and you're calling all these people and getting grants and getting, submitting to these festivals. I'm like, who's going to do it if I don't? And I think, one of the mistakes I made in the songwriting world was, maybe the second or third publishing deal that I had, I was still thinking that you get a publishing deal and that's what's going to get you cuts. And
I was just going to say that, like, if you just put your destiny in the hands of somebody else, you're screwed.
Yeah. I mean, what I found is when you start to get cuts, then they really get excited and they start pitching your stuff. But pretty much, getting a publishing deal is they open a door, but you got to walk through it. You got to charge through it, and you got to charge through every single day and keep things happening. You got to call co-writers. You got to follow up. And with the play, you know, I've got to do the rewrites, and I got to stay on the cast, and I've got to make sure all the details are there. And then if and when this does take off, there are producers that are going to come in and they're going to have a passion about it. And then I can maybe pass it off. But at this level, when you're starting something out, it's like writing a song. You can't just turn in a work tape and expect your publisher is going to go make a demo the way you intended for it to hear, and that they're going to get it to the artist, you know?
It's important to know that part of your evolution as a creator is that you're going to have to be a business person, which nobody wants to really hear. But, you know, there's three of us here that have acquired some level of notoriety and being able to continue to be creators for decades. And the reality is all three of us are saying that none of us, raise your hand if you wanted to be that person. None of us wanted to be that. I mean, we all love the idea, I'm speaking for you guys, tell me if I'm wrong, of a sugar daddy, you know, that sweeps in and makes your life better, pays you money to write, and then goes out and gets you gaggles of cuts one after the other, right? We all like the idea that it just doesn't flush out in reality very well. So I think it's an important takeaway.
I think publishers are
Go ahead.
Yeah, publishers are a little misleading in that way. That I had every publisher that we'd sign with, they'd say, okay, we got it. You know, we're going to handle your schedule. We're going to get you cuts on these records. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And finally, I got to the point where I would sort of listen, but not take it to heart, and not start tapping my brakes, because, you know, cuts for me, or publishing deals, always came after I was starting to get cuts. You know, like I'd have this gap between a publishing deal, so I'd get hungry again, and I'd start working it, and I'd do my networking, and I'd follow up on demos and all that sort of stuff, and then I'd get some songs cut, and then all of a sudden publishing deals would start to show up, and then I'd take my foot off the gas. Right. And so, you know, I think
that's an important lesson. That for a young writer, you got to create it. You got to create it. They will build it, and they will come.
Yeah.
Are you currently on your own publishing company now?
Well, I'm with Blue Water, so I've got like an admin deal, so that like when I got into the musical and I realized, you know, did the math of if I were to sell just the smallest amount, but I own the entire musical, I don't really need an advance or a publisher that's going to cover that. So I moved to an admin deal so they could also collect when stuff starts to get out there. But but I mean, it's been helpful for that, because that's one aspect of it that I've never really followed through, which is the following up on your money. Turn that down. Which is the following up.
You need to sell your Bitcoin right away. Run, don't walk. That's the loudest notification.
It's Sony. They want me. Hang on. Who's this? No, I forget what I was saying, but basically you mentioned also before about wanting to be a songwriter and not handling that business stuff. I think there's two elements to being a professional songwriter and being just a songwriter. And there's some great songwriters out there, but there's some guys who are not great songwriters, but are doing very well because they're good professional songwriters. They know how to network. They know how to follow up on stuff. They know how to, you know, schmooze is the word we use. And they do it really well. And that's a huge, important part of this career too. And in theater as well too. And there's some great shows out there. And then there's some sort of okay shows out there. I had this producer who came to Chicago. He's a Broadway producer. And she calls me up and she goes, you know, I've read hundreds of scripts and there's stuff on Broadway that yours made me laugh like they haven't. And I'm like, well, how in the world did that show make it to Broadway? And I'm, you know, 3-4 years going here. And of course, 3-4 years is not a long time, by the way, in the Broadway world. It took Hamilton like 8 years to get to off Broadway, and that's Hamilton. So, and it's the same thing where you've got some writers that are just really, really good at working the room, at getting funding, at making readings happen. And in songwriting, it's getting songs to artists, getting with artists, getting to hang out on the bus with them, going to shows, and they do really, really well. And it's not to be discredited to be a professional songwriter. Those guys that do it well deserve all the reward for it. And then there's some that just like writing, they're real purists, and, you know, like I'm really into song ideas and titles and what's this song about. And I've had to learn the other side of it, but it was never my strong point, for sure, you know. But for some it is. For some it's naturally.
Yeah, and it's interesting. How do you find writing you transitioned as a writer when you're writing a Broadway thing versus something you were used to writing in country. Was it just the issue of like showing up the next day and writing a song that is a Broadway song, or was there what were the changes in your philosophy?
Yeah, in terms of the actual writing process, not much was different. It was still kind of, lay on my sofa for a while, kind of half in out of sleep, think what would be a good song idea, what would I want to hear next, the process was about the same. In terms of the work ethic, I think is what you're referring to. I definitely have been able to use all the tools that I found in songwriting, about the getting up every day, doing writing exercises, following up with emails, pursuing new ideas, listening to new material. Really take it like a job and show up every day to do it. So it's not just sit around and wait for inspiration for me at all. I'm always ready with something when the inspiration comes to jot down an idea or shoot an email or do whatever I need to do to act on it. But there's never a time where I'm just sort of bored waiting, I wonder what the second act's going to be like. It's constantly, wheels are turning 24/7.
And right now your play is being performed at these festivals and touring around, so it's in a complete state.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that look like? Is that a $50,000 adventure? Is that a $100,000 adventure?
For me, yeah. For me, it's been on a shoestring. It's probably been just around 50 from the start. That's if you include, readings, traveling to do meetings and stuff, research. And then when you get to the festivals, there's bands and there's charts and there's lighting and there's directors and there's creative team. Plus there's festival fees and all sorts of stuff. So it adds up over time.
It actually seems like a fair price to me when you think of, taking something through its whole gestation period to get to a point where you can perform it and have an opinion from folks to whether it should continue on to Broadway. It seems like
a musical. Yeah, musicals are much more expensive too, I've found. This is why a lot of people just write plays, because without the music, it's so much easier, so much quicker, so much cheaper to put on. You need so much more rehearsal time. And then, my show, there's a Andrew Sisters kind of Greek chorus of 3 women that sing 3-part sort of jazz harmonies with the cast of 9. So there's a lot of moving parts. So it took a lot more rehearsal time. So
now, do all those actors get paid?
Yeah, and they get paid crap. My gosh, I thought we were paid poorly as songwriters. Actors, they, God bless them, man. And they actually get up and cry on stage in front of people and do stuff that I could never do. And they get paid crazy. What they were telling me.
You just cry at home.
Yeah, I just cry
your own home.
I'm gonna cry when we're done. Yeah, pay the actors. At the beginning, and where I can, I get friends would help, with helping with tracks, and Emily West. Actually, we were talking about Emily earlier. Emily was kind enough to sing on a bunch of the demos until I got some money in, and I could give her some money for singing. But yeah, everybody gets paid along the way, and I've, if anything, tried to raise the wages. It's funny. I had this one producer who was producing one of the readings. We were going through the budget for the reading, and we come to the actors, and he's like, all right, so here's what I think the actors pay would be. And it was like $75, $100. I'm like, are you kidding me? I said, they're going to go to Atlanta for a week and rehearse and all this. And he's like, yeah, actually that's pretty fair. It's about what it is. And I was just like, I can't do that. That's ridiculous.
It's interesting, all the creative fields. It's almost like people say, hey, they get to do something really fun. They get to write songs and be in the studio and make records, and they get to go and act, be on TV. So it's not really pay them. It's just because people will. It's a market economy. Somebody else will do it.
Yeah, I know. It's so ridiculous. It's so sad to be that. But, we suffer for what we do. At the beginning, we have to really struggle to make it.
So tell me what it looks like for give me the tale of two plays. So Tell me what it looks like if you get sucked up into the ethos and it becomes a huge Broadway thing, or if it just, what's the other shooting star that sort of disintegrates in the atmosphere of your play? What do those two paths look like?
Well, for me, to be totally honest, and I can be totally honest because I don't care what's going to happen to me at this point. You know, I already spent all the money; it's out there. You know, it doesn't matter to me really. I'd love to see it go on, and I love that there was 3 producers that came to see it that all want to follow through and do readings and help develop it. So great. But to be honest, my creative itch started to bug me again towards, like, it was literally the night of the opening in Chicago, and I started to think of, what else can I work on? You know, and I've literally got like 3 or 4 other ideas started now. And so the Wonder Woman thing, I'm definitely going to keep with it because I know it so well, and it's got some potential and it's got some legs now. So if it goes nowhere, that's cool. I've had a great learning experience, and I've learned how a musical's set up and how the process works. So, and I still always feel like, you know, my best work is always ahead of me. I've never looked back and said, oh, that's it, I'm done. You know, it's always like, that was great. I can beat that. Wait, give me a second. I can do something else. So I've got other ideas that I'm starting to work on anyway. So if Wonder Woman goes and gets bigger, I become less involved, I think, anyways, because producers who put hundreds of thousands and literally millions into a Broadway show are going to want to have more of their input on how it's run. So I can't be running around saying, you know, oh, that whip is not proper. That's a bullwhip, and you need the little threads at the end for the dominatrix scene. You know, I can't get into that minutia at that point. So.
Well, it's almost interesting because, like, it's I notice it in the songwriting cycle and in the producing cycle and the mixing cycle. There's a point at which your body knows that you're kind of done with it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and maybe not in a conscious dialogue, you start to be like, okay, what's the next thing? You know, at your opening, you realize, I've done my role in this play. I've served my role. And if it's I've done everything I could do to put it in a position to succeed. And it's 50-50. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But you internally, you know, it's like, okay, I need to go back and do that thing again, which is become the earlier version of the inception of an idea. And now that's what I do. I'm idea through concrete proof of concept. And then we sort of hope that other people are further on down the food chain.
And
I love that. Go ahead.
Yeah. What's interesting with this too is that it's you know, writing the musical was very different than like writing a song, you know, like, you know, one of the songs that got cut, it's done. I can't go back and change a lyric on the Carrie Underwood thing, even if it bothers me still. I can't change a chord progression in a bridge on something that Flat's recorded, you know, and is out, or anything that's done really. And with the musical, it's this constantly evolving thing. Like, the script that I brought to Chicago is not the script that I left with, you know? And when it goes to the readings, the script that I'm going to bring there is not the script that's going to leave the reading. And when it goes to Broadway, if and when it goes to Broadway, what we go into day one is not going to be the same show that opens the opening night. And so it's a really interesting thing. And what's cool about it is that you get it's a much more collaborative process, a much bigger collaborative process than songwriting. Usually there's 2 writers, maybe 3, if you have to write if you get to write with the artist. And then you've got, you know, in theater, there's directors and choreographers and actors, and everybody's got great ideas that jump on along the way. So it's a constantly evolving. It's like this strange monster that just keeps building. And
I want to swing back to my original thing that I said I wanted to put a pinhole in, which is, you were talking about, as a songwriter, filling the void in the room, right? It's like every day as a pro songwriter, you're going to go in, and this could be a writing session. The 3 of us would be unique because we actually all know each other. In a lot of instances, you're meeting folks for the first time. But there's a version, and it resonated with me, because it's like, I don't want to be what you are. And I don't want to talk over what Mike is doing because I know what Mike is great at. So it kind of seems like it flows into the play world. It's like, how do I become a muse in the room that I come in and I do a shapeshift to fit what's needed in the room, right? Be good enough that I can shapeshift to the void in the room, fill the void, and then selectively bide my time and be quiet while the other people are great at what they're doing, right? That for me, that is the chemistry of a great co-write. And
totally.
Some folks are just one thing. They're just a track guy. They're just a melody person. They're just a lyricist. But, why don't you talk to me a little bit about what it was like to transition from your creative experience of being in a creative room as a songwriter, and then did that affect the way you dealt with directors and notes from other writers and from actors and cinematographers?
Totally, yeah. And I forget...
You're probably well prepared for that exchange.
Yeah. Well, you learn, I learned as a songwriter in demo sessions, for example, if you go in and you tell the drummer, you could name any drummer that's a great drummer, what to do, you're going to get a shitty performance. If you just play them the song and tell them to do their thing, you're going to get something great, amazing. And so you learn how to get the best out of the musicians, the band, so to speak. And just like what you're saying, it's the same with going into a co-write session. If I go in with an artist and I know, she's great at this, she's got a great voice and she'll respond to this, then you try to stay in that world. So it totally transferred over to when I get to the rehearsals at these readings, and you'd sit back and let the director do their job, let them do what got them into the room. If there's an actor that got there and they made it through an audition of like 400 people and they got the part, there's a reason. And so give them a little space and let them do their thing. And 9 times out of 10, it challenges me to raise the script a little bit. Just like, hearing a great singer in a demo session, I'll be the guy that's behind, in the booth thinking of better lyrics because I'm hearing a better vocal all of a sudden than myself. And so it raises the work to a better level if you allow everybody to be great at what they do. Yeah.
I think it's interesting too that you're in a situation where you can say, hey, I'm going to go into this completely other field. But the reality is it somehow operates kind of just like the other field you're in, which goes to show you that.
Yeah, to me,
go ahead.
It didn't feel like that big of a change, really. And I didn't think about it too much, as opposed to I really had to do I'm sitting here staring at a big stack of books that I read about how to write musicals. But it didn't feel like a big change in terms of process or just laying down thinking of stuff. It was just coming out in a different form. And for me, it was a much more interesting form where, when I first got into songwriting, it was really Broadway musicals, Broadway and country were the 2 genres that I felt really honored the lyric more than any other genre. And being a lyric guy and a lyric fan, it was those 2 paths that I always listened to and thought I would follow. And so country at the time was very accessible, in terms of cutting outside material, and to write a song and get a song cut seemed a lot more achievable than going to New York and writing Broadway musicals. This is, 20 years ago or more. But the process to me is kind of the same. It's just you're spending more time on one piece in the musical. Let's say you spend several years on it, or you might spend several hours on a lyric in country, but you're still telling a story. And for me as a lyricist, you're trying to find that angle on the story that makes it interesting, that makes it worth listening to. What makes that song different?
There's a tie between, we're in a repeatable business, whether you look at any creative act, whether you're a painter, a sculptor, a musician, these are repeatable acts. So I'm always looking at what it is that is sort of a lens to see it through that says like, you know what? It's not impossible for me to go do this other thing that's creative. I just have to apply my creative process to it. Right? Yeah. I have to be able to honor, respect the ability to let this thing get as good as it can get. Because I spent a long time learning how to not squash ideas.
Yeah.
How to not overmanage players and people and other writers. And once you learn that process of how to be a part of something amazing, how to be like necessary in the equation, but not control it, then you can make a film. And a film is surprisingly easy. I made a documentary this last year, and it was surprisingly easy because it really followed in the footprint of writing a great song. And if you never get away from the heart of the matter, you're going to succeed. And I love the idea of this podcast talking to creators, whether they be, doing Broadway musicals or doing hit country records or producing or musicianship. I love the idea that we could see the commonality between those high level efforts and say, what's important in the creative process? If we just wipe away all of the monikers that we have, whether we be producers, songwriters, musicians, any art form, and you just say, we're all creators. And then you could say, there is certain things that are continually in common in our process. And those are the truly important things that transcend every genre, transcend every medium. You end up at a point where you start to understand in your older age, after we're talking 15, 20 years of being in that level, you start to realize that it really, truly is about being compelling and trying to connect and be better than the sum of your parts.
Sure. And I never stay too focused on the end zone either, on the end result, which probably to a lot of my publishers weren't happy about that philosophy about getting the cut. It was more about getting the song or writing the show or getting the scene right. And so, for me, there's this kind of, what do you call it? A postpartum that comes in when thing gets cut or it gets released, or I get so depressed at the last night of the festival or when the reading's over, because it's like, now what? Did you put all this energy into it? But the thing about being a creator in any genre, what was the thing? I forget who the artist was. It was like a Van Gogh type of person or something. And he said something like, if you take away my paints, I'll use pencils. And if you take away my pencils, I'll find a stick. And if you take away my stick and put me in a cell, I'll spit on my finger, wipe it in the dirt, and put something on the wall, because that's what I do. And I feel like that with writing, I'm going to make up stuff no matter what the genre is, and even in my worst depressions where I can't do anything, or my worst distractions, there's always a little something in my head, like somebody will say something and a little rhyme will pop into it, or I'll think of some real odd little quirky way to look at it that makes it funnier. It's just the way my brain works, and it only works if I don't make it contingent upon getting it cut, getting it on Broadway, getting a Grammy from it, whatever. And if that stuff comes, that's great. But to me, anytime I've had a big success like that, it almost slows down my process, because I start thinking about the success too much. And the first big check I got, like the 6-figure type check where you're like, holy shit, I can't believe they pay money for this. It was really hard to write for like months after that. I'm like, oh, now what do I do? I can't write that again. Tia Sillers, who's a friend of mine I've known a long time, she talks about how after she wrote Hope You Dance, it was like a struggle to do anything because everybody wanted to write Hope You Dance with her, and to try to recreate a good success that you have is near impossible. I mean, it is impossible because that was just another day for her, and the day that I wrote all those songs, that was just another day. I mean, could have been the day I was with you, Joe. Could have been the day I was with you, Mike. I mean, it just didn't happen that day, whatever we wrote, the thing didn't happen.
So do you find yourself being competitive? Are you a competitive person with other people?
Oh, no,
you don't strike me as that. You strike me as maybe competitive with yourself, but not with others.
Yeah. I mean, I never understood that. I mean, to me, and you guys know me, Mike, you know me real well. I'm always like, oh, you should work with so-and-so here. Connect. To me, it's like connect the dots is a blast. What a great game. When you find a great artist who needs a writer and it's a friend of mine, sure, go write with them, or a producer. The entertainment world is so freaking huge. I never understand why people are guarded over an artist or whatever it is. It's like, my gosh, there's so many songs. There's a new generation of teens every day practically that comes out that wants new material. It's an endless supply.
It is not a closed economy. It's not as though they're going to grab your market share. It's kind of like when people talk about the financial economy. You can go start a new business that generates an entirely new arm of the economy. It's expandable. It's infinite. As long as it's a ideas business where it's like they could capture a piece of people's income. You know, it's like the idea is good enough. And I've always felt that way about music. It's like good things, it may take years to get realized. Yeah. We were just on with Jeff Steele, and he was talking about 8 years waiting on What Hurts the Most getting cut. Mm-hmm. And it may take time, but you've got to be steadfast in why you do it, in the mission statement, in the kind of crops you create, even though there's not a buyer this season. Because as long as you sign off on it creatively, you hope that it's going to capture a part of market space, or it's going to generate new market space. You know, it's like, there's no reason not to be happy for your friends when they have success. There's no reason not to recommend your friends. They could go out and create a whole new part of the industry that you can be a part of.
Well, I love that. And also, just because, you know, if I hook an artist up with you, Mike, and they come in, or with you, Joe, and they write with you, and you guys have, you know, you win Grammys off it, that doesn't mean I can't go in and write the next day. I'm still writing. I'm still doing what I'm doing. Right. It doesn't stop what I'm doing at all. Right. It's like, I'm happy for you. It's great. I gave a friend something that worked for them. That's great.
I think generally speaking, creatives feel like, I want you to be successful as long as I'm successful.
Just a little less successful than me.
Yeah, right. And that's kind of, I don't have the competitive bone. I've never had it, but it's like, I see it all the time.
It doesn't take a competitive bone. What it takes is like a fragile spirit. It comes from insecurity. It doesn't come from the opposite. It comes from people saying, why not me? Why am I not good enough? Why is there success all around me? And I'm the glaring example of why is that guy not having success. What they don't realize, and we've talked about this, is that it just means that you're exactly on the right spot of the target. If all your friends are having success, it means it's only probable that you're doing the right things, and you should continue doing them, you know? And you have to make a decision. My son and I was talking the other day in the car, and I was telling him how I made a decision. It wasn't it didn't feel natural for me to be grateful and thankful and celebrate my friend's success. When I heard about it, I got that, like, what's going on here? All my personal insecurities started to rise to the surface. And then I had to make a decision that that's not the person I wanted to be. I wanted to be the person that was so grateful and happy, because I knew that whenever I had a little touch of that, that I wanted what I wanted from my friends. So I decided to be that person, and eventually became that person that it was naturally my response. But it's a beautiful thing, but it's I think for me, it was a learned behavior.
After you had your own success?
No, it was all along. It was all along. You start to see your friends coming up, like in New York City. We had a crew of really talented guys we were all hanging out with, and some of them started. Jeff Copeland, a good buddy of ours, started having success before me. And I made a decision to be grateful and celebrate his success. And the next thing you know, I'm out there making records with him that are multi-platinum records, you know? So that was...
Every time I've always, when I've compared my path, my trajectory to others, it's either I'm vain or I'm bitter. It's one of the two, because there's always somebody crushing it more than I am, or I'm just killing it more than somebody else. And thank God I'm amazing there, because they're not even signed, you know, or whatever it is. And neither of those ever feels good to me or helps me write better, you know? So I have to be real careful. And what really sucks, like Facebook and Instagram and all the online stuff, is that it's hard to keep up with what people are doing without that, without those two things happening, because I want to find out where people are playing. I want to see the live streams, but I also don't want to be comparing my life constantly with what everybody else has going on. You know, when you're talking about the interesting thing about success, the word success too, to me has never been this sounds so cliche about the money or about the cuts and stuff like that. It's always been about the rewarding feeling. Like, how, when you guys are in the writing room and these moments, like when you get that line, or you get that beat or that sound that you're looking for, or that track, that mix, whatever it is, that's the success to me. It's always is a very small place that I can find it throughout the day in putting these puzzles, these songs, these plays together. And to me, like, I can control that and I can appreciate that much more than if this show goes on. That's a success that's completely out of my hands. But I can lay there on my sofa and come up with a great ending for the second act, and that's my reward.
I love that you said that. We've heard that time and time again on the podcast from people that, and it's one of those things that will fall on deaf ears when you say it's not about money, it's not about success. Like, I can't tell you how many times I heard people that were us now, the 40, 50-year-olds, telling me that, but when I was incapable of processing it. But if you look at this podcast in our short little life, we've had a ton of people say, in all different genres of all different fields, the different levels of success, they've all essentially said that, which is like, if I were trying to find out a magic sort of overall sense of what these successful people were saying, you could not ignore the fact that people say the reward is the work. There's no one can take that away from you when you hit the space bar at the end of a long co-write, and it just is something that you can say, I can't believe I'm a part of that. That is the same feeling that you get when they hand you the plaque with the triple platinum in it. That's the same exact chemistry in your body. So at least you can enjoy that and make sure that you keep yourself in that place. And as long as you reward yourself with that, occasionally you're going to have plaques. Like, I'm looking in the back of your room there, there's a bunch of platinum records and things of note, those are consequence. Look at them. They're down on the floor. They're hung up.
I like how he looks over his shoulder like he didn't know they were back there. He positioned the camera just.
I didn't even hang them. I haven't had time to hang them.
So not important to me.
There's a whole pile of them out in the hallway.
It was either that or you could watch my son building Legos over there. So one of the two.
Well, I think that's a beautiful thing. I really appreciate it. We're coming up here on wrapping this thing. There was a couple other things I want to talk to you about, but I think that the thing that we covered, sort of the heart of the matter, which is like, I love that you're able to take the same muscle that you've exercised and sort of learned how to exercise in songwriting and turned it into this other thing, and you're unafraid to do it. And it's about the work. It's about being great at something and being a part of something and allowing it to be great without you. These are all great takeaways. This is how you get to be a part of work that's better than you. And I think that you've been able to do that consistently over the years. So
time will tell.
Do you have any place that folks can see this play? Is it on
wonderwomenthemusical.com? Wonder Women the musical, because it's about the three women behind the scenes that really were the character. That's where she came from, these three women. It's a really fascinating story, and there's documentaries out there and books about it too. But it's really fascinating too. Everybody, it shows how Wonder Woman, who has been one of the longest lasting action heroes of all time. Like Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman are the three long staying ones. And she was created as this feminist lesbian icon that all of those messages slowly got removed, and now they start to come back a little bit. But the original people that created this were this polyamorous BDSM group that was really into women's rights and the reproductive rights movement. And it's fascinating to see how all of those elements went into Wonder Woman, and it inspired this generation of girls that grew up to be the women's movement of the 70s. And then Linda Carter came out, and then all those girls have grown up now to the Me Too movement. And it's like every 20 or 30 years, another wave of women get inspired by Wonder Woman. So it's a little bit of the behind the scenes of how
it's fascinating.
Greg's very humble, but this thing also just won a whole bunch of awards at the Chicago Theater Festival and Atlanta as well, correct?
Yeah, one. Yeah, it did well in Chicago. I was surprised.
What did it win in Chicago?
It won 7 total. It won Best Musical, it won Best Book, Best Score, Music Director, Choreography, Lead Actor, Second Actor. It won 7, so it was great.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, it was fun getting to go up on a stage, and I hadn't done that for something. And it's funny. I got up there, and I'm not quite sure what to say because here's a room full of people that have been doing theater their whole life, and I felt kind of bad in a sense. I'm like, it's
a songwriter in you.
I'm like, I only wrote the book. I didn't expect to win an award. I only wrote it because I couldn't find anybody else to work on it with me. And then it wins the music. I'm like, I only wrote the music because I couldn't find anyone else to work on it with me.
That's amazing.
Well, I love that the backstory for Wonder Woman is almost more fascinating and compelling than the actual screen story.
Yeah, it's great. This backstory is incredible.
In our culture, there's never been a better time for this story. I mean, people will embrace this story.
Greg is also one of the funniest guys I've ever met, and the humor I've seen portions of this play going over it, and Greg's humor comes through in this. It is funny as hell.
So can they see it at that link? Can they actually watch the play?
Yeah, you can link. Well, I've been doing. We filmed the Chicago show, so you can see the Chicago show. There's a GoFundMe that we set up to help try to pay some of it back. That we were offering downloads of the show for a donation at the GoFundMe. But if you go to the link and if you go to the site and you really want to see it, just email me. I'll send it to you. I don't care.
All right. So the site, repeat the URL for us.
WonderWomenTheMusical.com.
Okay. And on there, they can find a link to the GoFundMe page. And let's face it, folks, pay the whatever little bit it is and watch the movie. This guy spent 5 years of his life doing it. So you don't have to give it away for free. That's the songwriter in you talking once again. You do need a publisher. You need somebody to stop you from giving away everything and overpaying actors.
So
you
bad.
Them
but you want people to see it. That's the point. I know. Yeah. So do I get paid for this, by the way? You're going to
unionize against yourself.
Yeah, checks in the mail, baby.
Yeah, he's going to start picketing his own shows on Broadway. All right. So
what's interesting too? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead. No.
Oh, I was going to say, with the pandemic thing, and there's all sorts of options for songwriters to get paid. And it's interesting. There was an arts commission. I was filling out an application last week, and they said to put down the wages you've lost as a writer. And I'm like, what is the writer?
What year do you want me to start it?
Yeah. You need that clock in Times Square where it's just like the national debt.
Unfair. Yeah, exactly. So I filled the form out as Jeffrey Steele. I just mentioned Jeff. So the wages that I've lost.
It's a petabyte. You're into the petabytes of terabyte, petabyte, exabyte. So any other websites that do you have a GregBecker.com?
Yeah, there's GregoryBecker.net. I couldn't afford the .com because I'm a songwriter, but the .net, Gregory Becker. Yeah, check it out. I'll put a link to this on the website and a link to your lovely podcast as well.
Well, we're going to we'll get awesome. all the pertinent ones. You could send us any URLs that make sense, and we'll put them in the description. Thank you so much for coming on and being an inspiration.
Yeah, thanks, Joe.
It's so much fun to be inspired by your friends. I find that we were talking about making the decision to be happy for your friends. I think that the best sort of unpredicted byproduct of that is that you get to be inspired by them. Because they'll do something that makes me think, oh, wait a minute. Greg did it. Why can't I go do this other thing that's just as risky and crazy to do? It's like, why not? It's possible. Yeah, these things are possible.
Greg did it. I can do it better. Greg did it. So let me go do it better.
Well, I'm gonna go to it and watch it and go to the GoFundMe page and shoot you some money. And excited to see it. Thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about the higher order of what it is to be a creator.
Thank you guys. Yeah.
Thanks, Greg.
This is great. Thanks for having me.
All right, Pally. From the West Barn, we're signing off. We'll see you next time.